Hi, and welcome to Home, the Second Story. We're two residential architects sharing real conversations with homeowners who've taken on custom home or renovation projects. I'm Marilyn Modinger of Runcible Studios, based in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and Boston, Massachusetts.
And I'm Sheri Scott of Springhouse Architects in Cincinnati, Ohio. And today we are joined by Patrick in Brooklyn, New York. Welcome, Patrick.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So we like to start with just 5 questions that are, it's kind of going to lay the groundwork for what your project was. Your project is in Brooklyn, New York.
Mhm.
What was the project? Was it a new build, addition, renovation?
It was a gut renovation that didn't plan to start that way, but turned into that.
Okay. That sounds like a story.
Yeah.
When did you start your project, and then when was it complete?
We started the project in November of 2024. It was complete in July of 2025 and still in progress.
Is it still in progress?
As all the best ones are.
So there are a lot of different ways to work with an architect. What was your experience? How did you work with a designer, architect? What was that situation?
We worked with an architect and expediter. We wanted to make sure going through a project in New York City, we wanted to navigate just DOB. The home is also located in a historical district, so we had that added layer of complexity. So the group who we work with, they were great. And to answer your question, they helped us in design, just kind of like consulting kind of the layout, our vision, and the execution inspections thereon.
So that was interesting. You said architect and expediter. Was that the same team? And can you tell our listeners what an expediter is for all of us in the suburbs?
Yes, they were all the same team. As far as an expediter, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around what it fully means. Our translation is that it's a person that helps navigates through getting the permits filed, completed, and executed. New York, like many other cities, are very unique in how they operate. And it's just someone who can take your plans and translate them through the through like the different agencies in a city.
Yeah, and I'll add to, doing a lot of work in Boston. So in bigger cities, the building permit application actually goes through maybe 10 or 15 different departments. And sometimes to make things go faster, you literally just need someone to go to that department, pick up the drawings and move them to the other department and kind of just stay on top of that. Because otherwise, if it goes through the normal channels, it'll take 6 weeks to move between each one. So anyway, lots to talk about there. But yeah, in larger cities, it makes a lot of sense to have an expediter a lot of times.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing we took for granted is you assume all these agencies speak to each other and they're very well connected. And quite frankly, they're not. So we oftentimes were just kind of stuck in just random in-betweens between Landmark, in between DLB, and between kind of it was very eye-opening to say the least.
We'll get more into this a little bit, but it's something that we haven't really talked about that much on the show. And I think that's why I was excited to have you on, Patrick, because, this is something that's not common outside of big cities. This is something that as an architect, we are doing constantly in bigger cities, in Boston, Cambridge, Somerville, places like that, where you really need to understand not just the departments, but also who in the departments, who is the person who can help you get it from point A to point B? Who can you ask a question of instead of, if you file an official question to get an answer, that takes 30 days. But if you talk to the right person, they'll give it to you in 3 days. So
Absolutely.
That kind of knowledge is a realm that we haven't talked about much about how architects are super valuable in those kinds of markets. So
Absolutely.
we're already talking about our big question that we want to dive right into, but knowing what you know now, sitting where you are now, what would you tell your past self? What would you do differently in your process?
Many things differently. I think in just kind of like looking at homes, just kind of like how we finance it, that's a whole different kind of bag of worms. I do think one thing that we underappreciated and underestimated is how early you want to have an architect in the process.
Oh.
And we knew nothing about renovations or constructions or just kind of how it works, but you get a lot of very specific questions asked to you at various points that have a huge impact, maybe in 3 months that you just never anticipated.
Yeah.
And as we were looking at homes, I honestly wish we would have just had an architect come with us that may have helped shape how we looked at a home. Maybe it would have influenced a gut renovation versus kind of a phased renovation. Hindsight's 2020, but just kind of like speaking to my previous self is like, you have an agent, you have a lender. If you're going to do work, you may as well have the architect in the process a little bit earlier because you may be able to point some things out that could actually help you negotiate the deal a bit better. And then you
Right.
may envision yourself in the home a little bit differently. So that's what we will tell our former selves.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's obviously we're biased as architects. Yes, we can really help at that stage. Can you talk a little bit about, because you had a really interesting deal structure that you put together, that I think it would be interesting for people to hear how you actually pulled off purchasing this home.
Yeah, for sure. We've been in New York City for quite some time, and I think it's kind of embedded into you that you're just going to be living in an apartment and you'll just kind of be renting, which is totally fine. And we were quite willing to do so. Our family grew and expanded, and so did our needs. So we were just looking like, what are we going to do for the next 5, 10, 20 years? What do we want our life to kind of look like? I was like, why don't we buy a house? And I think as I said that out loud, I think my wife was like, that's just never going to happen. Like,
Yeah.
how could we ever afford that? And this was in 2021. So this is like during a pandemic. I think the whole city was just kind of in a very odd place at that point. But I started just researching purchasing homes. And like, honestly, I was just on Twitter. I was on Clubhouse. I was on LinkedIn at that time, like everyone else was. And I kind of found myself nestled in kind of like real estate Twitter, in which I was just learning interesting ways of how people are financing homes and how they go about it. So to make a very long story short, what I ended up falling into was just kind of a 2-family home, living in one unit, renting out the other unit, and using an FHA loan to kind of get a lower down payment as opposed to 20% down. So that was just kind of the beginning of our journey of how we financed it. After that, I just did some very basic things, right? Like just continue to read and educate myself as much as I could. We of course asked everyone we knew about it. They were like, you guys are crazy to buy a home in New York City during this time. But hey, if you're going to go about it, you may look into these different things. But what we did was a very basic method. We spoke to a lender and we told them our goal. We went through the qualification process, the pre-qualification process. So we kind of knew the budget that we could play with, assuming we could rent out another unit. So we just set up a Zillow search and we just had alerts come to us. And whenever a home kind of fell within like some criteria, we just went to the open house and we were just like, hey, agent, here's our story. Like, could you give us a shot? And we did this for 3 years.
3 years.
For 3 years. It wasn't like every single week or like every single weekend. Like they were kind of like, peaks and valleys. Like sometimes would do it all weekend. Sometimes we wouldn't do it for a few months. But what ended up happening is like we just started to understand trends and patterns in the city, and we could very quickly spot outliers. And we found an outlier that was in a very great location that we loved, and we just went for it. Like over 3 years of looking at homes, I'm like, this is probably as good as it's going to get, which is not true. Other deals would pop up. And we just went for the home at that point. So one last thing I'll just add is, we have a lot of friends and family who now visit us and they're just like in awe of the home. We put a lot of effort into it. And my message back to them is it was extremely difficult and it took every penny we had, but you can do it. There's nothing that we did that was special, right? We don't come from wealthy families. We used our 401ks. Like we went against every common practice out, never pull from we went for it because we felt that the investment into like our family was like the best investment you could make. And I think it's worked out for us in like many personal ways, but that's kind of how we structured it and went about it.
I love that you used the word investment in that, especially with your family, because it's not only an investment to get a return on your dollar, which I'm sure you will in the location you're in. And real estate usually does do that. But really, it's an investment in your family and how you want to spend your day-to-day life. And sometimes you put it out there early, and the value you're getting is you get to live in it every single day and spend your hours there.
Yeah, I agree. We spend, I work from home. Like we spend a lot of time here. And we're boring now, right? We don't do too much. Like we're not out and about. So like I want to be comfortable where we are. So
Right.
yeah, I agree. It was a very deliberate choice. And like, again, I think people have a lot of questions about how we went about it. And we are always very open because again, renting is totally fine. And like, we were very so willing to do that. We did it for 3 years while we were searching, but I think throughout the process, we just learned a lot. And I think it's kind of the same. Like we own a home and like we're paying the same amount we would have been paying for rent in this city, all things considered.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, the other part of the investment in your family and the longer term situation is that because you held out for the perfect house that fit all of those things, now it can be much more of a forever home instead of
Absolutely.
we bought something in the first 6 months we were looking, and now 5 years later, we're already looking for something else because we've
Absolutely.
outgrown it or it wasn't a good fit. And that's incredibly disciplined on your part.
It was not easy. Like I know I'm
No.
like kind of sharing the highlights, right? But
Right.
it was hard. Like we had disagreements. We definitely had different perspectives. We would ask a contractor their opinion, which was like so different from it was just, we just learned a lot, but it was just really awesome for us to go through it together. And we know everything about this house inside and out, down to these 3 panel doors behind us. That was a question. What door do you want? And you
Mhm.
think it's a very simple question.
Yeah.
It's
It's never
actually,
simple.
it's actually not a simple answer to give. So yeah.
Right.
So when did you bring in an architect or your design team? So you got the house and then you said, did you start renovating right away? Did you move in? What was that like?
Yeah, for sure. So just kind of speaking a little bit about New York City and our process specifically, this house was perfect, but it also came with its own set of baggage. The home had violations on it. And part of why it was such a great deal is that we had to purchase the home as is.
Yeah.
So we actually
Yeah.
purchased the home acknowledging that we have landmark violations and DOB violations. That was the whole thing. We ended up using an agent, and um, agents tend to have referrals that they could introduce you to. The first referral were to GCs. So we ended up meeting with a number of GCs, and through the GC we ended up going with, they had an architect.
Mhm.
So that's how it went. I think again, hindsight's 2020. I think I would have deliberately looked for an architect. I mean, in fact, that's Marilyn, how you and I met. We're trying to do a very, very small project at a house.
Yep.
And I was like, we've been here before, and we've
Yeah.
just been reaching out to architects to start with the plan before we kind of get into the work. So that's how we kind of assembled our team.
Yeah, and that's right. I mean, you had reached out to us saying, "Hey, can you help with this part of your project?" And you even said in that introductory email, "I want to talk to a designer first." Or it was either like it was in our first exchange where you're like,
100%.
"I'm not doing this again," where I'm talking to the contractor first.
100%. And again, speaking of the team and like how we went about it, the GC was like, you guys could just move in. Like we'll just kind of patch some stuff up. You guys live upstairs. We'll kind of do the downstairs. And we were so cost conscious. We were like, sure, like that's really, really awesome. But after we spoke to the architect, he was like, but there's going to be noise. There's going to be dust. Where are you
Yeah.
going to sleep? Are you going to pull a permit? Do you want to pull a permit? If you want this house to have value at some point and you sell it, it may not be an as is sale again. A buyer may want to know the permits and like what's good. And just started posing a lot of great questions that we hadn't considered. So that then allowed us to take another look at the project, which ultimately it was going to be cheaper just for us to do a more extensive project, which kind of led into the gut renovation.
So help us understand that. I mean, that's something that Sheri and I understand deeply, but help our listeners understand, why was it cheaper to do a gut renovation in the end than it was to kind of piecemeal things?
The GC, they have a series of trades, an electrician, an HVAC person, series of trades as they call them. And then the architect helps you kind of craft your vision and the plan. And as you craft that vision and your plan, you kind of bid these things out individually to the trades. And that's what brings together the total bid. Just how we wanted to design the home, our electrician was like, I don't know how old these wires are. This is a 120-year-old home.
Right.
If I end up opening up this wall, it may be $1,000. It may be $100,000, and I would never know. So let's just say it's going to be $5,000, right? And then you speak to the plumber. The plumber's like, well, if you kind of want to move this pipe around, I got to kind of work these. So by the time you go through all these individual trades, it's all a crapshoot between, is this going to be a $5,000 body of work, or is this going to be a $50,000 body of work? And then you still have to assume the risk that you trust what's behind the wall for all the previous owners. All that being said and done, I think it's how much risk you want to take on. We're just like, listen, if we're just going to do this thing and pull the permits, go through that pain anyways, let's just go ahead and do a gut renovation, which I believe in the long term has ended up being cheaper for us.
And it's a planning also. So if you decide to go ahead and do the gut renovation, then you are getting financing for all of that at the beginning instead of scrambling in the middle when you find all the things you're inevitably going to find.
Right. And things happen, right? Like, we had things happen to us, even though it's a gut renovation, which kind of on the fly, you need to make very, very quick decisions, which again was another great thing, of speaking and working with our architectural team. And the thing is, they never told us what to do. They just gave us options and trade-offs, which I felt
that.
was very helpful for us. Sometimes people have very strong opinions based on their preference, but that may not be what you want. So it's really great to say, all right, here's the situation. It's not ideal. You can do this, and here's a trade-off, or you could do that. What do you all think? And that just fostered really great dialogue across kind of everything.
Yeah, that's so important. I want to underline that 100 times, that the best collaboration is not necessarily when everyone's coming to the table presenting solutions, but when they're saying, like, these are the possibilities. This is why you might pull this lever or pull that lever, and here are the other consequences. The only way that works, though, speaking from an architect's perspective, and as a former builder myself, the only way that works is if the owner, as in you, are open to that and ready to have those conversations. So I'm curious to hear what that was like for you. You know, you mentioned the 3-year process of finding something. You finally got something. You know, you were mentioning that there was maybe some stress along the way and maybe some differences of opinions. Now it's within that you're now starting a gut renovation project where you're now tearing this whole thing apart. So can you talk a little bit about how you stayed in a mindset, or what helped you stay in that mindset of problem solving and working together and all that through that process?
Yeah, absolutely. By trade, I kind of work in technology, and, you know, these are very small teams and they perform to varying degrees of success, but I found always the common denominator is just proactive communication. But it's very difficult and it's very annoying. And like, you kind of don't want to do it. So like, I have an uncle who does kind of construction around New York City, and he would tell me, your trades are going to be there by 8 a.m. Be there by 8 a.m. Just go walk the site. Just go talk to them. Just go see what's going on. And it sucks. 8 a.m., you're there. You don't know anything. They obviously know you don't know anything. So the more that you kind of walk the site and you start to understand your floor plan based on how your architect has laid it out with you, you can just start to spot things, which then just fosters a question. Hey, what's going on over here? What are you guys doing today? And that, for me, always kind of opened up dialogue in which I'd be like, let me call Adam. Adam was our architect. Let me call Adam really quick. Adam would then speak to our GC, then it would go to the foreman, and then you would end up having this conversation of 4 people, and was like, like when we did the design and when we did the original bid, this is not what we thought it was, but here's where we are today. Here's what we can do. We can do a change order. Change order, for folks who don't know, is it's a change in your design and it's something that's not in your bid. These really stink, which is really great to work with an architect ahead of time to avoid that. But I just think it fostered so many, I would say a benefit is that it allowed you to get creative on the spot in ways that you couldn't imagine once you were there. So that's how we went about it. Just a lot of proactive communication, being present and being active. Although we did have this team of people who we trusted and put a lot of our money into, you still have to be part of the process as an owner. For us, our strategy was to be involved, but not a distraction to the outcome. Because that's also the risk of, again, someone who doesn't know something speaking construction terms that you have no business speaking about.
Yeah, and showing up. I mean, it's often the architect and contractor's worst nightmare when the homeowner is on site every day. Because if the homeowner is talking directly to the subs, then, and the sub's like, oh, okay, well, this is the owner. They said to move this light fixture, so I'm going to do it. The GC is like, no, that's going to mess up the HVAC, and the electrician didn't know that. Then the architect's like, that's a code issue. So the way that you described that you would see something and you call the architect and kind of go through the chain of command is really important. But I also think that you being on site is really great too, because here's like a side note or a soft thing that happens. The more that you're on site and that they know who you are, it motivates them to do a good job for you.
It does.
100%.
And you and your family, they get to know you. They hear about your
100%.
family. There's a sense of camaraderie that's there, that you're not just some mysterious entity off to the side. You're a real person,
Right. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you're the person who has to end up living there.
That's right.
So it's one thing to show up, but it's another thing to say literally good morning to every single person. Yeah. And we're not perfect, but I'll try to bring waters, or I'll try to bring coffee. And I was trying to butter them up. Honestly, I was trying to make them feel good. But I knew that after they kind of did the first part of demolition, I was like, oh, wow, there's just a lot going on, and we're going to be stuck with these people for a very long time. So that's such a good point. It was good morning, kind of learning, kind of seeing little parts of your house, getting us excited about it, taking pictures, taking progress. So it was a whole thing, but I just felt that was very helpful. Also, a GC will always tell you never speak to my guys.
Yeah.
So I learned
that's their job.
I learned very early.
Yeah. But handing out donuts or coffee or water is fine.
It goes a long way. It really truly goes a long way.
There's a difference between getting to know them and being genuinely interested in them and the work they're doing on your house versus giving them direction and telling them what to do and how to do it. So
absolutely.
Or making changes, because that is a disaster coming from the homeowner.
One also last thing that I'll tell my previous self is get to know your GC, get to know your architect. Of course, your trades of varying degrees. I did not understand what a foreman was. That is also a person that should be very connected to the conversations. The foreman of a project, I think that person is key to the success. And there's a lot of miscommunication between the GC and the foreman, because the GC is managing many projects.
Right.
So the foreman that's on your specific job, again, never speak to them directly without the GC, but having them part of all of the major conversations helped us. It took us 6 months to learn that, though.
Yeah. And just for everyone, so the general contractor will have someone on their staff so oftentimes it's a general contractor, and then there's a project manager. Sometimes that's the same person. That project manager might be handling 3 to 5 jobs, but the site superintendent or foreman or supervisor, depending on what part of the country you're in, that person is on your site all day, every day. They're the ones who know every detail about everything. They've got the whole thing memorized. And honestly, when we do our weekly meetings during construction, we want that person at the weekly meetings, because they're the ones who actually know the house better than anyone. And that person is thinking, what's happening this week? What's happening next week? What's happening the following week? But that's kind of it. It's the project manager or the general contractor who's thinking, okay, what's happening from week 3 to 6 and then beyond, and how are we getting materials in the door? But it's that foreman or the site super who is just down in the weeds. So yeah, I love that you brought that up, because that's another thing I'll add is that when you're interviewing contractors, ask to meet the potential foreman who's going to be on your job site, because that's the guy or some gal, but often guy, who is, speaking as a former gal in construction.
Right.
But that person is going to be the one that's going to be having the most interface with you.
Asking to meet them is great, because we've run into several situations where they aren't intending to have a site supervisor, where the GC, who is running 3 different jobs, is going to stop by in the morning and stop by in the afternoon. And, it just does not work that way. It does not work that way. They're cutting corners.
Yeah, knowing what I know now, I would never, ever, ever allow that to happen.
Mhm.
And not only meet the foreman or the supervisor, they need to be part of every meeting. That like if we ever do a project again, part of every weekly meeting, the person has to be there. We
Mhm.
just found so much disconnection
Mm,
because again, I call the architect, I call the GC, and like we have a plan that needs to filter down to about 10 other people.
Right.
The foreman is the best person to do that, and also the foreman's honestly, they have some really good feedback. Like,
absolutely.
and they kind of want to be involved in our experience as well. So like, that's a really great person to utilize.
I just had an experience. Just yesterday, I went to visit a site of a big house that's being built here. We're the architect and doing construction administration. And I have an architect who works under me that's in charge of the project. And then I went to meet the head GC, and the site supervisor wasn't there and my guy wasn't there. And so we both were like walking through the project, and really neither of us knew the details. We know the overarching things and big things that are coming. We were talking about invoicing and, how much we're going to be over at the next invoice and why. But we didn't know the details. And it just, what you're saying now really drives that home. Like there are different roles for different people, and you need to have the right people in the room.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Well, I think also, there's a lot of conversation around how to cut costs during projects. And a lot of times people will they'll cut out the architect. Well, we don't really need that,
Right.
or they'll say, you don't need a super, someone can just stop by in the morning and the evening. And what ends up happening is you pay for that in other ways, sometimes often way more than you would have in the first place.
Right.
Yeah, my mom's doing a project in Florida right now, and that was her thinking. It's Florida. It's a very small town. It's like permits. Like, why do I need any of this?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. The person asked her about 2 questions, and she's just like, I don't know. And I'm like, this is
That's
not going
why.
to go well. It's not going to go well. So
I'm curious about, what it was like for you and your family during construction. So you were not living there, or were you?
we were not living there. We decided to kind of float our apartment because, again, the GC was like, it's going to take 4 months. Like this
Yeah.
can't possibly be a big project. It went 8 months, right? So we learned a lot. But how it was for our family it was honestly scary. Again, I think now of like all the happiness it brings, and it's so easy to kind of like cut out in the moment, but it was scary. We were spending a ton of money that quite frankly we didn't have. We were putting a lot of trust into people that quite frankly it's their job to kind of like sell you and get you as a contractor. But like once the job starts, you kind of learn them a little bit.
Mm.
You get annoyed a little bit. So it was stressful. There was a lot of decisions. I think we ran into decision fatigue at some point, and we're just kind of like, whatever. We were able to kind of like rally. But it was very stressful. I think, the like doing the demolition, pulling all the stuff out, doing all the rough-ins, right? So, everything behind the wall, like the plumbing and the electric, it was hard to get excited. But like once they put up the walls and then we started to see the home take shape, I think that kind of like reinvigorated our excitement for the home. So we kind of went through this excitement of getting the home, this nervousness, like, oh my goodness, this is really happening. The sobering reality that this is going to be a much bigger project, going through Landmark and DOB, which in New York City and Boston, like it's just very interesting.
Mhm.
To it's happening and then like you kind of move in. But again, I think everyone kind of feels this, but saying it out loud, you it's you spend so much money and you're just like, oh my God, we made the wrong choice here.
Mm.
And I think we need to give ourselves grace to just accept it and just ride with it and just be fine with it.
So how did your project end? Was it a smooth ending, like a clean punch list and all? What was the wrap up like?
So just kind of in light of transparency, I'll kind of back up a little bit. In the middle of the project, we had a little bit of a boo-boo with our GC. Not sure if it was a miscommunication or whatever it is, but we had a very specific plan with our architect to have an open concept, which for 100-year-old homes, it's very delicate. They have these things called joists that kind of like run throughout the home.
Yeah.
And in demolition, they kind of spotted that the joists were either, impaired or had rotten or kind of cracked. And we had a pretty big changeover to replace several joists. Like this is the structure of the home. Like this arguably is probably more important than any fixture or appliance you could pick.
Absolutely.
Some way, somehow, the architect specifically called for 10 by 20 joists. 8 by 20 joists were installed. Really huge mistake. Our architect spotted it. And as they spotted it, our GC then had to go back, remove those joists and replace that.
Yeah.
That fractured the relationship, right?
Oh.
And, they had to eat the cost. Their guys had to eat the cost. They lost time. They spent more time on a project, a lot of business impact there. So we were able to complete the project cordially, but we felt we wanted to kind of do a punch list with someone else. So the project ended smooth with this GC. We paid the draw. We closed out the permits. It was totally fine. But we moved into the house about 90% finished, and then actually went with another GC that our architect recommended to do the punch list work.
Oh, interesting.
Which was very unique because you then had another person who came in who had a lot of opinions, of course.
Of course. Found every, yes.
I'm like, don't worry about that. Please don't even say that. Don't tell me that. But that's how it went. So we ended up moving in. We lived on the one unit just to kind of like stop the bleeding on the spend. So we already get the family here, and then we finished out the basement to get a renter in there.
That's definitely a scary situation but thank God it was caught. And even though all of that wasn't fun, as you say, the relationship was fractured, which is, very evocative. Like I'm just picturing that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, can you imagine if you had the wrong joist in there when the project was finished, or,
right.
Or it was unsafe and you found out 2 years later, something horrible.
Exactly. Like we were upset and frustrated and embarrassed for just like, how could this like happen? Right. And I don't know, maybe we felt like shame or just, we spent all this money. This is going so horribly. But then you start to speak to other people and they're like, oh, that was your issue. This is what happened to, and then you find out there is just so many people who have gone through very specific things that just that have been tough. Right. So I think that helped us feel better and like understand this was part of the process. But again, our architect, not to be biased, but like he caught that during his weekly inspection. Like he was just like, this does not make sense. Can we talk about this? What is this installed? Because I called for this. It doesn't look like this. And it just really opened up a lot of things. But our architect was the one who called that out, because ultimately when they do an inspection, he's on the hook for that as well.
Yep.
So definitely looking out for us, but also being mindful of his professional status.
That's a great example, and one I'll probably use in the future, because I'm always trying to describe to our potential clients what we do during construction administration. And a lot of times I'll say, we make sure that things are built the way that we drew them, the way that we designed them, the way that we talked about them through this whole 6-month, year-long process of designing your home and making all of these decisions so that you don't have to make those decisions again, and to ensure that it's being built the way we drew it for the structure, the code compliance, all of those things. And before you start the project, or before you've lived through joists that are the wrong size, which we have also, I'm not sure we've ever caught joists, but beams quite often. Like we'll call out for 3-ply, 18-inch beams, and they put in 2. It's like, come on. It's infuriating from our standpoint. But it is something that we review. And we observe. We don't tell anybody how to install them and how to do that, but we certainly can check and make sure that what we put on paper and what is part of the contract actually happens on site.
Yep.
And then part 2 of that, if there is an issue like the joist, helping resolve it. Because it's one thing to point it out. It's quite another to get them to replace it, to get them to pay for it, to get them to stay on the job. I have so many stories like that where I'll just look up and I'll say, okay, demo crew, you're literally removing a beam that if you take that one more column out, you've taken 3 of the 4 columns out, you take that column out, this whole roof is falling down. I need everyone off this job right this second. And that's not actually in our sort of, my insurance guy, my lawyer, like, when I'm telling stories. But there comes a point where we can see what's going on,
and you're like, you say something.
If you see something, say something.
100%.
Yes, exactly.
But I think but the real professionalism also comes in getting that resolved and not backing down. And I have been in so many situations where I've had to have those really tough conversations. And what for homeowners, I want to say, are you prepared to have those conversations in a situation that's adversarial, discussing things with subcontractors, GCs about structural issues or whatever? Are you prepared to do that? And if not, that's an issue.
We learned a lot.
Which is why you're here. That's why I was so excited to have,
Sure.
to have you here. On that note, as we kind of wrap up, there's I want to make sure that, we talked about, we used a lot, or you and us, we used a lot of words like scary or, overwhelming, or like all these kind of big. As you're in the house now, what's something that when you're in the house, every time you're in there, you're like, I love this. We did this right. This is a good thing.
Honestly, I think the first thing is like, I cannot believe we're not, and this is like our home. Like I think to me, that's just worth everything we have gone through.
Yeah.
The second thing, this is very New York City coded, but we have laundry in our home. So that's another thing. But I feel very proud that like we know the details of the home. We know why we chose these doors, right? They're not. Yeah. We didn't just get a flip from someone, and flips can be done very tastefully and really great. But we know the home has been built with love, and everything is kind of thought out within the context of how we live. We host a lot. We have a lot of friends over. We love to watch sports. I'm the youngest of 7, so we wanted a lot of space for family, right? And we feel really proud that this could kind of be a home base for people. The last thing I'll just say is like, every time people come here, they're like, excuse my language, no way this is your house. No.
And you're like yes, it is.
Did you guys spend like $10 million? And to be able to like actually break it down, that's like, it was very hard. It was very scary, but like, here's how we went about it. Like just demystifying the process, I think for us has been like, I'm happy that we can kind of be an example of what could happen. So those are all the things that we kind of feel kind of in here. There is still work to be done. We're always like doing something here and there, but it's our little thing to do.
Yeah. I think that's home ownership, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to let the cat out of the bag too much, but when you and I chatted before, Patrick, you were kind of like, well, I kind of have the bug now. Now I know how to do this.
Oh.
So you're kind of thinking maybe, you might be doing it again?
Absolutely. Like, I think it'd be really cool to do so, especially in New York City. Like, I think housing is an actual national, like, crisis now. And, I think a lot of what you're seeing in New York City is like downstream of housing. Yeah. There are a lot of systemic changes that need to happen that we just went through and learned. Like, this city doesn't incentivize people to build, especially if you have to go through DOB and Landmark. Like, I have a lot of feelings about what happened there. But yeah, like knowing what we know now, like I would 100%, if the opportunity present itself, go to a home, but also go with an architect and try and negotiate based on the vision that we can kind of craft. Like, I honestly think may arguably be more helpful than an agent in some cases.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And I feel like we'll have to do a check back in with you in a little while and see what you're cooking up.
Absolutely.
Well, I really appreciate your candor, Patrick. And there's so many good lessons in your story that you were able to share for our listeners. So I just really appreciate you taking the time and joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me share my story. Also, thanks for answering my email and just being
of course.
so great and like helping us think of our projects. I really, really appreciate it.
So many good lessons from Patrick.
Yeah, that was awesome. So he did email me about doing a project. That's how we got in touch. And it wasn't quite the right project fit for us, but just something in the way that he was talking about what it was, I was like, we should talk more. I want to hear more about your story and what you've done.
Yes.
But yeah, just super cool. And then our intro interview, which was supposed to be 15 minutes, was like, we got into all this cool stuff. So, yeah, lots of good lessons.
Starting with, possibly look at houses. What do I want to say? Potential houses. Look at potential houses with your architect.
Yeah.
Engage them early, which we become a broken record about that. But, we do have some things to offer. And sometimes it's maybe not for 3 years, take your architect through every single one. That would get very expensive because they're not going to do that for free. But when you find one that you think this has some potential, I'd like to get a second opinion, then call them in and pay them to walk through with you and give, just feedback.
Yeah. And we've said it around here before, but as much as we love brokers and realtors and everything, sometimes some of them will get out a little bit beyond their expertise and say things like, you can do an addition, or you can finish the basement, or you can tear this down and start over. And that actually, especially in jurisdictions like he's in Brooklyn, in a historic district, like you can't just do whatever in those districts. And even in places, even the suburbs, as you were joking about, Sheri, like you still can't just do whatever you want.
Right.
So
no. Yeah. Yes.
I think it's important too to have that expertise and to check that. That's a really big investment that you're making. And I've always been surprised at how quickly people make the decision to buy a house. They do a 15-minute walkthrough and then they're like, let's place an offer. And I'm like, whoa. So, which is kind of how real estate works. Like I get that.
Yeah. And to know people's motivations. So when you're walking through with a realtor, they're mostly a salesperson.
They're trying to transact.
And walking through with a contractor, it's hard for me to articulate the difference between walking through with a contractor versus an architect. But I feel like if you are paying an architect for their professional opinion, we're going to give you our professional opinion, not try to win the job. Because if we give you a good opinion and something that's helpful, we'll come back for the next house that you're looking at, right?
Right.
And the contractor, I feel like sometimes is trying to sell that job, trying to get that job because maybe it's in their neighborhood or their wheelhouse or something. So just know what people's motivations are when you're taking advice early on.
Exactly. And sometimes the GC is not trying, because they're like, oh, this doesn't have enough for us. So we don't actually, they don't want the person to buy that house because they're like, well, this isn't a big enough job for us. And so they're kind of discouraging. And I would also say that sometimes contractors will just talk about what the homeowner is asking them and say, like if the homeowner says, can I add a bathroom on the 3rd floor? The contractor says, yeah, you can.
Yeah, you can do anything. It's going to cost you an arm and a leg, but...
And the architect might say, well, you can, but what if we, did it on the 2nd floor? Because then we could do this and then we could be creative and then we could do this and that. So this is also, our listeners know, hopefully by now, we are an industry friendly podcast. We are not here to say that different members of our industry aren't being, good professionals, but we all do have different expertise. So bringing an architect in, early to get their expertise is really important. Bringing an architect in to talk about how to transact something, not super smart. Like we kind of know how to do some of that, but the point is to bring the experts in to do what those experts do.
Yeah. And jumping to the end of the project, him talking about the architect doing construction administration, our final phase, and catching those joists. Homeowners don't know what to look for. They would have never thought to put a tape up there and see if it was 2 inches too small. You just don't. You're in there and there's just so much to look at. And even if you're in there every day, you just don't know what to look for. And you would assume they can read on a print, they are supposed to be 2x10s, not 2x8s. And it goes all the way back to who's ordering the product, because it probably just showed up on site as 2x8s. the guys working on site picked up the floor joists and put them in. And that's why we always say, like, nobody looks at drawings on the job site. It's terrible, but they don't double check. So it goes all the way back to whomever ordered the product, and you may not have ever had a conversation with them. It gets ordered, it gets delivered, it gets installed. And so the architect is kind of your last
check and balance.
Less check and balance. Exactly.
I mean, back from my builder days, I remember when I would be putting together those orders for framing packages.
Yeah.
And I would be working with my lumber yard, who I worked with all the time, who we had a giant account with because we were buying millions of dollars of lumber from them. And, we put together the package. I would read the drawings and say, we need 2x10s, whatever. My contact at the lumber yard, who was a total expert and really good at their job, would be like, yep, you need 42 2x10s. Great. Yeah. They would send me the order. I would initial it and check it off and say, yes. They would send it out to the pit, to the yard. The guy in the yard would pull 2x8s instead of 2x10s, and they would get sent on the truck.
Yeah.
So
there's so many opportunities.
There's so many points of breakdown.
And we all make mistakes, right?
And I think that's the important takeaway here too, is that there's a lot of honest mistakes that happen because there are a lot of moving parts. So yes. I never want to say we're doing CA because the contractor is dumb or we don't trust them. It's not about that at all. Good projects and good project teams are watching out for each other. Good contractors want architects to perform CA. Good architects want builders who are, thinking about these things and who are taking ownership and who are questioning things on the drawings.
Bringing up things about our drawings. Exactly. Like, let's talk about it. Yeah.
And those are the best projects. And I want to underline that 100,000 times because I feel like part of one of our secret missions on this podcast is to talk about that industry professionals who are good ones want to work together and want to do right by the owners.
Yep.
And it's all about finding that. And then as the team working together. So being there and seeing that kind of stuff is really, really important for the whole team.
Yeah.
The other thing that we talked about early on, and we emphasized it while we were talking through it, but I just want to underline it again, is the investment in your family. So a lot of times, we have kind of a funny way of thinking about primary residences as a source of wealth.
Right.
This is an investment and someday I'm going to sell it for more. So I have to be thinking about resale value. And you're like, but you're living here for the next 20 years. If you're selling in 20 years, nobody cares about the tile that you put in. Like, it doesn't matter. And I think people get really caught up in seeing their primary residence as an investment, which makes it a monetary investment, which makes it harder for them to see it as an investment in their family. Like, how much dollars, like what dollar amount would you assign to things like a home where you can host your family? You're the youngest of 7, as Patrick said.
Right.
What dollar amount is that worth? And I think investing in the family, your family, and investing in the life you want to live really changes the calculus. I mean, you don't want to do dumb financial things.
No.
But you do things like you go on vacation. There's no monetary return for a vacation. You're literally spending thousands of dollars on a vacation. You don't get any money back for that. But what are you doing? You're investing in your family. You're investing in togetherness and recharging and doing something fun. And I think we would do well to think about our homes more that way instead of always thinking about it as it must pay for itself with dollars.
Right. Yeah. Or putting things off. If they had done let's just clean it up so we can get moved in, they would be in a much different position than going ahead and getting the construction loan and doing the full gut renovation. I think that was really smart. And of course, there are people that cannot do that. And we do figure out how to phase projects for them. But another thing he brought up was just creative financing. Like, let's figure out a way to make it happen. And there's more than one way to, I hate the phrase skin a cat.
No, we're not. We don't say it. We don't say that.
We don't say that. There are more ways to solve the problem.
I think the other thing that doing the full gut renovation does that people talk about after the fact, definitely, I mean, my clients certainly do, is the peace of mind knowing that they know what's in the walls. So if you do that sort of piecemeal thing, you're like, oh, well, I did replace all the light fixtures, but I'm pretty sure there's some old knob and tube back in there or something else. You're like, well, I replaced all the bathroom fixtures, but while we were doing that, I could kind of see some squirrely plumbing stuff and like someday that might leak. And, I say all of this, of course, with the same caveat of like, not every project can be a gut. That's not financially feasible for everyone. But if it's your forever home, like and you're already moving out and you're already doing all this stuff, take care of the stuff behind the walls for that peace of mind. You never have to rip it out again, and that it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, agreed.
So I feel like there's a ton more things that we could keep talking about for Patrick's episode, but we'd be here for another hour. So
yeah, I know. Maybe we'll pick some up on a snack episode.
I think we should. Yeah, lots of really great tidbits. Thanks for joining us today on Home the Second Story. If you'd like to come on the show and share your story, email us at admin@htsspodcast.com. We would love to have you as a guest. Be sure to rate and subscribe wherever you get podcasts and follow us on Instagram. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Home, the Second Story podcast. Feel free to share this episode with a friend. Contact information for both of our architects are in our show notes. And don't miss future episodes. Follow or subscribe to our show for free in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you're listening right now.